Hey everyone, welcome back. David in History for the Ages here. So I want to do something a little bit different, something kind of fun. I've been doing this for 27 years, and obviously I've heard some really funny, crazy things in my class. So I just wanted to go through some of these funny stories. And if you've had any, if you were a student or a teacher, leave them in the comments. I think everyone can get a good laugh out of some of these things. I remember stories of students coming into my class one day. It was one student, and he had an open can of beer and he was like shocked that I told him he's not allowed to have an open can of beer in a classroom. So I remember that one. Just little silly things students say sometimes. It was once, just the other day, it was one of the reasons I made this. I was lecturing on the ancient Greek writers and I was talking about Homer. And I asked the students, can you think of any writers today that 2,500 years from now people are going to still read? Like we still read the works of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the student just raises his hand. He goes, 50 Shades of Grey. And I'm like to myself, no, I don't think that's going to be, a well-read book 2,500 years from now. But it was just funny. I've had students, also do some weird things they've said. I had this one student tell me once that he was convinced the end of the world was going to come in 2020 and no one was going to be around. Well, we're still here. So there was that. Another funny little story is there was a once I was lecturing also on the ancient Greeks, and I was lecturing on Athens and Sparta, and I was asking my students, where would you rather be a woman, in Athens or Sparta? And this was right after the movie The 300 came out. So this one again girl raises her hand and she goes, I'd rather live in Sparta. And I'm like, why? And she goes, well, all the men are really hot in Sparta just because of the movie. So that was kind of funny. And then there's just some weird things they believe. One of the stories that I still will never forget is the story on the Minotaur. So let me share this one for you. So I was lecturing on the Minotaur, and maybe some of you know the basic story. It's the story of, this Greek myth and this Minotaur, which is half man, half bull, and Theseus and the labyrinth. And I was going through the whole story. And after I told the whole story, a student, again, he raised his hand and he goes to me, so where are the skeletal remains of the Minotaur? Have we found any? And I'm like, it's a myth. But he still didn't believe me. And to this day, this guy still thinks there's actually real Minotaurs at some point in history. And I'm like, no, there's never been a half man, a half bull creature. So there's that one. So I always thought that was kind of funny. Then there's things I do to mess with students. And one of my favorite things that I've done a few times is lectures on April 1st. And this is actually interesting because I'll just make the craziest stuff up. And it's remarkable how many times students will just believe it and listen to it and write it down. And I kind of use that as kind of a lesson as well. Don't just believe everything your professor says. So there's one time, I'll give you a couple examples. I did a story on, I think it was the Ottomans, it's been a long time ago. And the Ottomans, I made some make believe country that they were at war with. And one side had an army of rats, and the other side had battle ostriches. I even went online. I literally Googled battle ostriches, and this picture came up. So I'm like, all right, I'll use that. And so I brought that in there, and they're like really convinced, and they're writing about this battle that never existed with battle ostriches and rats and flaming cheese that was used to attack the rats. And they just write it all down. And then I did another one once on Mark Antony, Octavian, and Cleopatra. So I took obviously real people this time. And, I talked about, the actual fighting and the Battle of Actium and all that. But then I made it really crazy. I had at one point Cleopatra getting stabbed in the heart with a sword and pulling this sword out of her chest and still fighting. And then I had one of the gods come down and intervene and talk to them about it. And the students are writing this down. And this time I remember it was after 10, 15 minutes of making it crazier and crazier, a student finally raised his hand and goes, is any of this really true? And I'm like, no, it's April 1st. And then you could hear them all groaning and crumpling their paper and throwing it to the side. But it's a kind of a good little lesson, don't just listen to everything you hear and take it for granted. So there's that. There's some of the weird things students have written on their Blue Book answers. So just a few examples. And here's one. I don't know if you could read it well, but it's Michelangelo. So they had to write a little paragraph on Michelangelo in this picture. And they didn't study, so they just wrote here. Let me see. Michelangelo is a mutant turtle, humanoid living in teens with other fellow teenage mutant turtles. So they were just kind of being silly. But I remember once I used to tell them, hey, if you can't think of anything, at least write something funny down, entertain me. And then I've had students write World War II, 1 billion people were killed. I'm like, nah, not that bad. And people telling me that they had pet mammoths. Whenever I lecture on the Reformation, I get this from time to time. I'm lecturing on Martin Luther, and in their exam, they'll write Martin Luther, because remember, this is in the 1500s, mind you, right? Was a great civil rights leader in the 1960s. And I'm like, oh boy. So no, that they get that. Romans, whenever I talk about the Romans, instead of writing aqueducts, they write ducks. So apparently the Romans had a lot of ducks. And then just other little silly things I've seen, like students coming into my wrong class. So, for example, I've started a semester, a student will come in, and I get it. Sometimes, if the class is a Tuesday, Thursday, and they mix up the time, and they might show up for the 9 o'clock class instead of the 11 o'clock class, whatever. But I've actually had students come from the wrong campus. They literally signed up with another instructor on another campus and ended up in my classroom. And I'm like, how does that even begin to happen? So that was kind of a funny thing too. What else? Here's another little funny image I have here. So this is one that a student once put in their blue book, and they had to write about Cyrus. And so Cyrus was a Persian emperor, and honestly, that's all that I can remember of him. Unfortunately, I don't know the subjects well enough. And then she does this little cartoon and says, here's a sad picture of me in my future occupation. Would you like to supersize that? It's actually pretty good art. But you know what else is interesting on this one, in this particular image, is that I tell my students it's okay if you don't do well in college. Maybe college isn't for you. My parents never graduated high school, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing if you're not, getting a PhD in history or something, right? There's a lot of cool things you could do in college and so on if you do some of that in life. So there's some of those things that were funny. I've had other things as well. I've had students tell me the moon landing didn't happen. So I've had that. What else? I'm trying to think of some other really kind of funny things off the top of my head here that I've had happen, or weird things students have said. But that's a good chunk. I'm really kind of curious what you've heard, what you've had, if you've been in a classroom, if you've seen something funny happening or not. I had one time a fight break out in the class, not much of a fight, but it was just weird. Two students, and this was years and years ago, just sit in the back of the room, and one just apparently looked at one funny, and they didn't even know each other, and one just wanted to beat up the other one. So it was that. Nothing too crazy other than that I've had. Thank God, knock on wood, I haven't had anything too insane. But yeah, I am kind of curious what you've experienced, what you've had happen in any of your classes. If you were a student, especially, you must have seen some weird things happening. And then there's always weird things on the campus taking place. I remember one time, just this person just randomly walked into a classroom, just lost, looking for. I didn't even remember what it was. Just they were looking for food. It wasn't food. It was like they were looking for a specific restaurant or something. And I don't know. There's just some weird things like that. So all sorts of fun stuff and oddities. But that's life on a college campus. So, anyways, I'm looking forward to hear what you experienced. Thank you for watching this. Hope you had fun with some of it. Everyone have a great day, and feel free to watch my history stuff. Of course, lots of cool things here. All right, everyone, take care.